everybody, and welcome to our Facebook and YouTube live event from the British Council Teaching English. My name is Karen, and today we are talking about planning for every learner. Last week, Emily and Gabo did a webinar each for our Teaching English webinar mini-series on planning for every learner, and we thought we'd invite them along to come and share some of their tips, listen to your ideas, and share amongst each other tips and tricks for planning for every learner. But first of all, Emily, looks like it's a bit windy. Where are you?
So I am on the coast of Nicaragua, near
Oh,
San Juan.
lovely.
Yeah, I saw some whales jumping on the beach the other day, which was nice.
Wow,
Not on
how
the beach,
amazing.
far out at sea.
Fantastic. And Gabo, whereabouts are you?
I am about 50 kilometers from Montevideo, again on a seaside town in Uruguay, South America.
So you're both like
Amazing.
near the sea. How lovely.
Very near.
So
Yeah.
inspiring being the sea. I'm in Catalonia in a grey, rainy day, but it's good to have rain in a desert or in a drought.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for
In a
sure.
drought, absolutely.
So welcome everybody. We're talking about planning for every learner. And so Emily, let's start with you. Well, first of all, teachers, tell us where you are joining us from. We've already got Scotty.
Yeah.
We've got Scotty here to say hello. There we go. Yay. And we have Rachna also in Mauritius by the sea as well. It could be a theme.
Nice.
Hi, Rachna. So, Emily, what's your interest in like having different learners in the classroom?
Well, so I taught at further education college in Glasgow for about 15 years, and I taught learners mostly from refugee backgrounds, but also some learners from Europe. And I found that in my classes, the students who were maybe from Europe and had finished gone through university, gone through school, had finished their education, progressed very quickly. And then my learners from refugee backgrounds who maybe hadn't had the same opportunities in life, often struggled a bit more with certain things. They had maybe developing literacy needs, mental health issues, and so they would. There was a big disparity in my classes, so there was always a mixed ability level class. It was never everybody in this class is perfectly elementary, and I think I have never in my life taught a perfectly elementary or perfectly beginner class where every single student is exactly the same. They're all perfect at reading. They're all really good at reading. They're all very good. Like that just doesn't happen. Everybody's always got like good at speaking or good at listening or needs more help with reading. So yeah, I just had to always find ways to manage having mixed abilities in every class. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever come across a kind of everybody the same class either. I don't think I'd know what to do.
No, how boring would that be as well? If
oh my God!
Yeah, imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Gabo, how about for you? What kinds of differences do you have, or you'll tell us about your situation?
Yeah, more or less the same thing as Emily. While I was working in New York, we operated from the university an outreach program for immigrants and refugees to the United States, and we found exactly the same things. We ran it together with Leslie Painter Farrell, who gave an amazing plenary in IATEFL 2 years ago. Based on our outreach program. And in Latin America, I've mostly worked with public schools trying to implement English. And as you know, from the 1990s up to now, we haven't been able to crack the code. So you have in the same class a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced student. And how do teachers cope with that on a daily basis? Right?
How do we do it? Exactly. And that's exactly what we're here to find out from both of you. Let me just give a big welcome to, here's Rachna saying, hi, Emily, again. and we have Teresa from Austria. Hi, Gifty, lovely to see you here from Ghana. And Scotty is in the UK. And Mohammed, hi, nice to see you again here. Lots of familiar names who join us quite often. Hi, Sukma in Indonesia. And we have Margaret in France and Ghana. Fantastic. And Yang from Angola. Welcome, everybody. So here's a comment from Rachna, which I think sort of sums up what we've been saying. Planning for every learner means to design lessons and activities that cater to the diverse needs and learning styles of all pupils within a classroom. So, Gabo, when in your classes, you've got, like you were mentioning, all of these different levels. When you plan a lesson, like how do you begin in your head?
Well, first of all, when we talk about differentiating learning as we're doing, people generally think I have to come up with like 4 or 5 different lesson plans for one class, and I teach like 20 classes a week. How do I do that? That is unrealistic, completely unrealistic. When I start planning, the first thing we work with our teachers in doing at the onset of the year, at the beginning of the year, is to have a very good diagnostic of who is the learner we're going to teach. So we explore everything through interactive classroom activities. We gauge the levels of English we have in the classroom, but we also look at what makes students tick, what they like to talk about. We even take the course books, for example, and we open the course books to the topic section, to the let's say the table of contents, and we discuss with students what they would like to tackle first, instead of going sequentially through the book. And then we make sure that in every single lesson, we devote about 5 to 10 minutes of the lesson to orienting the students, to finding out what they already know about the topic, to have them self-assess their language abilities, to give themselves an attainable goal for that lesson. So if in this lesson we're going to learn how to give advice to a friend, then can you do it now? How do you give advice in English? Now, just think about, when do you give advice to your friends in your mother tongue? And then what would you like to be able to do at the end of the lesson? And then we share our learning outcomes in terms of functions. And we constantly guide the students to go back to what I already know, and what I can do, and what I can do better. I think that is a fundamental way of orienting the students towards their learning process.
I love that what you just said there about, like, not just going page 1, 2, 3, 4 in the unit, but looking at the unit and going, oh, where would you like to start? So you're giving that sort of ownership to the learners, and then that helps them choose where they want to start. Brilliant. What a great tip. Thank you. Yeah. Just before we come on to you, Emily, comments are flooding in. Just wanted to say hello to everybody who is joining us on YouTube and Facebook. We are talking about planning for every learner with Gabo and Emily. And we've got Ayman from Sudan joining us, and Nadia from Jordan. Welcome, everybody. And we've got somebody from Peru. Hi, Boris. And Vietnam. All over the world. This is fantastic. So, Emily, when you plan, how do you start in your head? I'm guessing with a doodle. Maybe not.
Often with a doodle, actually. Quite often, doodling helps me to think and focus and plan out my ideas. But yeah, when it comes to learning, I put the learner first and figure out it's quite hard when you plan for the first class because you don't know your learners. So my first class is often based around getting to know my learners and what their goals are. So for example, I would get them to doodle or give me some pictures that represent them, like cut out magazines or find them on Canva, for example, and then get them to share who they are, what makes them tick, find out their goals. I've got lovely visual templates, visual tools on my website that you can download, and they help students figure out what their goals are and where they want to be. And that helps you to figure out what topics to cover in class to help them get there. Like if they're wanting to focus on work, then you can do some lessons on work, for example. So put the learner at the heart, find out what it is that makes them tick, that's going to motivate them, and
Yeah.
focus on that, which can be quite hard in itself when you've got 20 students and they're all wanting a completely
And
different
they all want
goal.
different things.
So you need to find the middle ground. Yeah.
Find the common threads. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So teachers watching, what do you do when you plan and be thinking about your different learners? Tell us in the comments. And yeah, great question. Tell us in your comments. So here's Mohammed is saying, you can build your lessons on the same SMART goals, but using different materials and instructions tailored according to your learners' pace and capacities. So Gabo, in terms of this, using different materials, how do you sort of manage the different materials? Do you have the same handout, or do you, because you were talking about a course book before,
Yeah.
and choosing different bits of the course book, but you can't cut half of the exercise out or make 20 different copies. What do you do?
Well, basically, I'm for the past 20 years, I've been doing mostly teacher training in the National Teacher Education College or at the university level. And one of the things we've done away with is the usual lesson plan, where you have your learning outcomes and then the different steps and the timing and the goals and all that. And we changed that for mind mapping, because I think that is more representative of what we do in the classroom. We serve different learners, and we know we can differentiate different things. We can differentiate the materials, as I think it was Mohammed said, but we can differentiate the process. Some students working individually, some others working in small groups, while you teach a mini lesson to a small group of learners who are struggling. Or you can change the product, having the same materials, but having students do different things. One thing that we use quite successfully is the choice board. So the outcome for every lesson is expressed in different kinds of tasks or activities that students can do at their own pace. The idea is that by the end of the learning process, either through homework or as part of a coaching session, students will complete all the tasks or activities that we propose in the choice board. But let's just think, for example, you have just taught this lesson on giving advice. And then for the students who really struggle, who are at beginning level, they may choose to do a matching activity where at the end of the lesson, after they've learned how to give advice, they match the right advice to the situation. Whereas the intermediate level learners may be able to do a little role play dialogue on giving advice through cue cards. You give them a situation and they have to pick up the cards, and they do that in a small group. And then the more advanced students can actually be engaged in reading something and coming up with like one of those agony on columns that are no longer popular, but still work in the language classroom, right? Where, because this is part of what students actually do in their daily lives. We are not asking them to take on roles that they don't have. I mean, that they don't take in real life. We have to, okay, here is something a teenager wrote. How would you respond to that? And in that way, when you plan with a concept map kind of organization, what you get is the final result. You have the input, which is the learning outcomes, and then the final results. And then the final results are differentiated.
That's brilliant. So that's like sort of turning everything upside down in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great, because we often start with the plan, which for me is always very linear.
Linear.
Which is what I like about yours, Emily, that your work sort of goes that way in a mind map. Here's a comment from Salam who's saying, I like this topic because we're struggling with this. Yes, always.
It's hard.
And it's hard. There's no very quick solution, unfortunately. And here's one from Margaret. I agree that thinking about how they give advice in their own language is a good starting point. Yeah. So it's like you're saying, starting with what they already know.
Exactly. And what is close to them, right?
And
I always quote Guy Cook, who says that we generally teach English for tomorrow, for when you go to college, for when you travel abroad. And what learners want is English for today.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's so
yes,
true.
yes, that's so true. Emily, we've got here's one from Nadia. I think planning is important to get rid of problems in general and cover all the ideas that I have in a lesson. So when you plan, are you sort of what you mentioned before that you're thinking about like the different learners in the class. Do you also create different materials for everybody?
No. That would be impossible. If you create like 25 lesson plans for 25 students, you're going to be up until 10 o'clock at night every single night preparing. I actually have developed a lot of minimal preparation teaching tools and techniques. Many of them from doodling. If you take one visual, for example, one little simple drawing or a picture, I've managed to get 3 hours of lesson out of one image. And there is ways of doing it. I've got a blog post for ellie.com on that. But yeah, taking one visual, for example, is great because you can use it for lots of different learners. So for example, at beginner level, if you have students thinking about their goal setting, to go back to that, you can have students writing I want to, for example, at beginner level. At elementary, pre-intermediate, maybe they do I will or I'm going to. Maybe at upper levels, you let them be a bit more free about the kind of language. I would absolutely love it, or I wish, or it is my absolute dream to, that kind of thing. So one image, and you can have, if you did that activity in the class and you happen to have, like, for example, an advanced learner and beginner learner, you could still complete that activity with their language that they already have, that they're using, and then add to it. So it can be very, very flexible. One visual template, one graphic tool. It's kind of like what Gabrielle was saying about the mind mapping. Mind mapping is so good for all levels, and it gets students to practice the language that they have, and then you can add on top of that.
Well, just move like
One.
connected to that, Emily. One for you, Gabrielle. We're talking about any room. This is from Mohammed. Could there be any room for L1 home language to assist speakers of other languages in multilingual classes to individualize instruction? Like, how do you bring that into your classes to accommodate different learners?
I would recommend our colleagues who work in monolingual situations to become familiar with the theory of translanguaging, which is not translation. It is true that translanguaging as a belief, the belief that or our learners already have a tool that they handle, and that is their language one, can help them navigate the second language. But translanguaging itself is an approach. It's a framework for teaching. It has specific techniques and it has specific procedures. It's not just going from one language to the other haphazardly, right? That is what we do here. We allow the students to use the first language, whereas we maintain communication in English. So the class is taught in English. That is one of the directives of national authorities. But students are free to use whatever language to be able to make their meaning across. Yesterday evening, I was listening to a false beginner who had taken 3 years of English in primary school through the Ceibal in Inglés program. You know, this is a British Council program we have in Uruguay where kids get 1 hour of video conferences a week with a remote teacher. And of course, they were trying to place him. Was he at A1 or A2 level? And the kid was resourcefully using the language to make his meaning across. He was completely inaccurate. Like, for example, he was asked a few questions about his preferences, sports, this, that, the other. And then the interviewer said, would you like to interview me about that? And the kid said something like, I like sports. So that is what he has said. I like sports. And now the question was, I like sports, with an intonation for questions. So basically, what we are doing there is allowing the student to begin to communicate, and then when we rephrase, they begin to notice, oh no, it's not I like sports, do you like sports? And they begin to notice, and from that noticing, it is that we start building a linguistic system and we begin acquiring the language.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And I think that links quite nicely with what Rachna's saying. Use a language which learners feel at ease as a medium of instruction, and gradually use the key terms and vocabulary and English. Now we had, here for Emily. So this one perhaps for you, this is also connected to perhaps if you don't speak the learner's home language, like for me, I mean, I do a little bit, but I pretend that I don't. So this one from Yang in Angola, how do you use differentiated instructions to meet different students' needs? So in your classes, Emily, when you've got people from different languages, different backgrounds, different levels, different interests, you know, you were talking earlier about like, there's 25 of them and they all want different things.
Yeah.
How do you give different instructions to help everybody?
Yeah. So my students were, if I was to learn all of their languages, I would be speaking Farsi and Arabic and Chinese and Polish and Slovakian and all of these languages, which is just impossible. So for giving instructions, keep it very simple, use short sentences and one instruction at a time. So for example, open your books, stand up, talk to your partner, read the text, just short. And I think one verb per. I think it was a British Council post I read this in actually just a few days ago. One verb per instruction, and I thought that's so simple and so easy to remember.
I remember doing a training program and trying to work out how to simplify, how to like help teachers understand. I'm like, one verb, one instruction. One verb, one instruction.
Did you write that post?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, genius.
One verb, one instruction. Yes, I like you know, simple systems to follow, steps to follow.
Yeah.
Here's something from Margaret. What she does is I often send some discussion questions in advance, and that gives them a chance to get their thoughts together. Gambo, do you do anything like that, like sending students anything in advance or asking them to think about anything in preparation for another lesson?
Oh yeah, I love advanced organizers. That's what I call them after Osubel. David Osubel, who wrote this amazing book on educational psychology in the 70s, but he's all about meaningful learning as opposed to rote learning. And he is a big proponent of what he calls advanced organizers. I ask students, for example, to keep their own personal dictionary. And I ask them to do, now that we have all this explosion of apps and digital resources, we're going to learn about parts of the house, try and find images and learn how to do it and bring it to class and then teach it to your friends, right? And that could be, for example, what I call a do now activity, which we do in the first minutes of the lesson. As students trickle into the classroom, they may be coming from a PE class or from a history lesson, and they are not tuned into English yet. So we do a do now activity, which is something very, very brief that they can do as they sit down, turn around, talk to a partner, and that sends the message that they are doing it, that we are in English class. We are already in English class. Of course, preparing through giving them different scaffolds, written scaffolds. If we're going to cover, for example, a topic, and one of the key things is an extended reading, particularly at post-beginner intermediate stages. I set questions before, right, the actual reading of the text. And then when we do the whole pre-reading stage in class, they already come prepared with some ideas. Because, you know, we have sometimes 45 minutes. That's all the time we get, and we tend to rush things over. Now, be aware that not all students are going to do the homework, right? Or the preparation. But the idea is that
No.
homework has to be perceived not as more of the same that we do in classroom, but anticipation for what we are going to do. So that's another way of bringing motivation on board.
That is great. I love that because in my language classes, I'm learning Catalan. The homework is kind of more of the same or repeating what we've already done. And I have to confess, I don't always do it. Well, the answers are in the back of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just got a couple of comments coming up here. This is from Salam again. English for real life, creating a real need. Very important. Like you were saying, Gabo, you know, we want English for now, not for later on in the future. And this one, I agree with Gabo from Margaret. I agree with Gabo's comments on translanguaging. I also speak English all the time, but I confirm if their French translations are accurate. Yes, so that's using the home languages. Emily, we had a very quick question. I can't find it just now, but it was, was it translanguaging, or Gabo, what you were talking about, translanguaging, or was it transcoding?
Translanguaging. Well, those are different things. Transcoding may be part of translanguages, but not vice versa. Translanguage is this belief that you can allow your learners to use any language at their disposal to be able to convey meaning while you sustain communication in the target language. And it has been researched extensively, particularly by Ofelia Garcia. And again, you know, I'm a big IATEFL fan. And having been president, during my tenure as president, Ofelia Garcia gave one of the most amazing plenaries on translanguaging. And if you go to YouTube and Google IATEFL Ofelia Garcia, she shows you step by step how to do translanguaging there.
Fantastic.
And I think that is, it's about the tool. Right, we are supposed to give learners tools so that they can manage independently. And language one is one of those tools they already have at their disposal.
Exactly. Thank you. Emily, this one is from Gifty in Ghana. Big topic, assessment, often comes up. Now, can I set different assessment questions for individual students? What do you do, or what are your thoughts on this for, you know, the different levels? How do you know where everyone's at in your assessment?
I think it depends on what assessment you're preparing them for. If it's an assessment in class, then I think absolutely, definitely set different assessment questions. You can set different tasks, for example, to learners. So, for example, you can set difficult tasks and very difficult tasks, with the difficult tasks being complete all 10 questions, the difficult tasks being complete 5 questions, or for example, write 5 questions, write 5 sentences, or write 10 questions, or 10 sentences. So you can grade that way. Like, write a paragraph, write 2 paragraphs, write 10 words, write 100 words. There's all sorts of different ways that you can set different levels and difficulties for your learners without additional preparation. But it depends on the assessment. If you're preparing them for something like IELTS or FCE, then I think you need to follow whatever those guidelines are within them. Certainly the assessments I used in Scotland were quite flexible, and we could give different levels to different learners, but that depends on either on particular context.
I liked how you described and you mentioned it in your webinar as well, difficult and very difficult rather than easy and difficult.
Yeah.
What it's a tiny change, but what does that difference make for you?
It means that all students are getting a challenge. So if you say to some students, you're getting the easy one, then it instantly says to them, you're in the easy table. You need the extra support. Yeah, I don't want to be in the easy table. Maybe you do want to be in the easy table, but if you've got difficult and very difficult, then every student is getting a challenge. And it might be that some students, you could ask them to choose if they want to be very difficult or difficult. And it might be on the day they've just come off a 12-hour shift, they've come straight to class, which a lot of my students did, and they're very tired that day, so they just want the difficult version instead of the very difficult version. Or it might be that they're super motivated and always want to pick the very difficult version, and that's fine. And it means that they've completed something. So if you've completed 5, you've finished. Or not finished. You're never finished in my class. There's
Never,
always
never
something
finished.
else.
Finish, teacher.
No, you're
No.
not. I'll find you something else. You can write another paragraph.
I remember reading a technique when I've tried with my students is asking them, how many of these can you do in 5 minutes? And it's when you say answer all these questions, they go, oh, I can't. And then when you ask them, how many can you do? They always do like say, oh, I can only do 2, but actually do 8. Like it's amazing when you put that onto them, you know?
And that was what I was referring to with give themselves goals, and then they get surprised that they fall short. They do more of the goals than what they actually think of themselves.
Yeah.
And if I may, just another suggestion for assessment, don't forget the good old Bloom taxonomy. Right? It comes with questions, and you can vary the different kinds of questions that you ask. Actually, there's a lot of research that teachers of beginners and elementary students tend to remain in the lower categories, and very seldom do they do things like evaluation, creation. So if you have Bloom's taxonomy, design assessments at all the levels, and that is a great diagnostic tool also for what your students can do. Have them do, what can you do? Just answer as many as you can, right? Or solve as many tasks as you can. And then you have a map of where your students are at.
Brilliant tip. Thanks, Gabo. Just finally, Emily, this is a very long comment, so it's going to take up the whole thing. So I'll just show it quite briefly.
Wow.
Over the top. From Yang, using a technique called using the board like a dictionary. So this is like separating it in different ways, what the students are supposed to write. But it reminded me, thanks for that idea, Yang. It reminded me of you did a dictionary task for students that you mentioned in your webinar, where students write different things according to where they're at. Do you remember?
That was my task? That was in my webinar?
Yeah, new words.
I didn't get a chance to read that entire.
Oh no, it's okay. It's about using the board for vocabulary, and it reminded me of the task that you do when learners write new words in their notebooks and different word. Can you tell us a little? Remind us of that.
Okay, so like Gabo, I'm also a very big fan of using graphic organizers, visual tools, and vocabulary notebooks. A lot of my learners maybe didn't have the study skills, so they were developing new study skills, and so I would work a lot on notebook layout with them. So, for example, they could have the back of the notebook is for grammar, the front of the notebook is for vocabulary. You have a messy notebook for writing notes and doing thinking activities, etc., writing ABC to answer questions. And then you've got your tidy notebook, which you go and write up later and make it look pretty and engaging, add little doodles. But yeah, for vocabulary, you can give them like a vocabulary organizer. And I've got this somewhere on YouTube. It'll be on the YouTube video from
it's on the webinar. Yes.
So you got a word, put a word inside a cloud, for example, and then draw a little speech bubble, and the speech bubble has the translation to their language or their languages, and then a little picture frame where they can draw a picture, because Whammies and Mead have discovered the drawing effect, and the drawing effect is basically that if you doodle something, you're much more likely to retain that vocabulary as you are to just writing it. So add doodles. It also makes your notebooks much more engaging and makes you want to actually look at them again.
That is very true.
Yeah, write a word, a translation, a doodle, and then write it in a sentence so that it's understandable. Not for example, do you like apples, which don't really doesn't tell you anything about what an apple is.
Exactly.
It's something that actually tells you what an apple is. Something that demonstrates understanding. Because otherwise your students will just write, do you like whatever the new vocabulary or noun is?
Well, on the board the other day when I was in the class, I was thinking of you and the drawings, and so I drew some pictures of the vegetables. Yay!
Cool. Yeah, great.
Well, the time has flown by. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabriel and Emily. Have a lovely day. Teachers, do join the conversation, continue the conversation in the chat. We've got so many fantastic comments coming through and suggestions from everybody. And thank you for everyone joining us from YouTube as well. Quick question I'll just address here. Somebody can't find it, but somebody asked, where can you get a recording of this live event? And you can find it on our Facebook channel under videos, or even scroll down and you'll be able to see and watch the video again for all the ideas. So thank you again so much for joining. Enjoy the sea, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have
Bye,
fun.
everyone.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye, everyone.